Hi, I'm Marco Rubio, and this is this week's edition of Constituent Mailbox. Every week we go into the email box, we go into our mailbox, we pull out some letters or emails that's indicative of the kind of mail we're getting, and we read it here on the air, and then we answer your questions. So we thank you for writing us. It's been a busy week, as you can imagine, between votes on gun rights and the introduction of immigration bill, and obviously the horrible tragedy in Boston, Massachusetts. We've had a lot to talk about, so let's get started. Let me begin with an email on immigration, because I've gotten a lot of these, obviously, because of my involvement in the issue. And let me begin by describing the issue, basically. We have a broken legal immigration system that's not modernized. It doesn't take into account the needs of the 21st century. We have immigration laws that are not being enforced, and in fact, we don't have very good systems for enforcing them. And we have millions of people living in this country illegally. We don't know who they are, where they are, why they're here. And so that's why I've gotten involved in this issue, to try to find a solution to it, but a solution that's responsible, that isn't the kind of reckless ideas that we've seen offered in the past with regards to this. And we've gotten a lot of comments with regards to what I've offered, and some are obviously important points that we need to address. Others are based on some misconceptions that maybe people have heard in the past and are addressed in our bill now. So let's get started. The first is an email from Ross in Melbourne, Florida. He writes, "Why isn't your gang of 8 calling on ICE for their input into border security? This is just so wrong. They are the ones that are on the job 24/7 dealing with our border security. Where is the common sense in our government? It seems to be sadly lacking and is destroying America as we know it." Well, I agree that common sense is sadly lacking in American government. And common sense, by the way, is the reason why I'm moving on this issue, because we do have a very serious problem that needs to be solved. Let me begin by saying that the front lines of the border is not ICE, it's the Border Patrol, and they have a very important job to do. And our bill actually increases the number of Border Patrol officers, significantly increases the number of Border Patrol officers on the border. We did get input from ICE. I've actually met with a gentleman named Chris Crane. He's the president of the union for the ICE agents, and listen, we met for about an hour and a half. He raises very legitimate points. They actually have not as much to do with the bill as they do with the current administration. And his frustration, and the frustration of many ICE agents, is that they're not being allowed to enforce the law, that they are being put under all sorts of constricts, and their hands are being tied behind their back, that they can't do their job, to the point where they're actually afraid to arrest people, they say, and that they're afraid to put them away because they could get sued or something bad could happen to them. These are valid points that we've heard. The law, I think, is going to make it easier for them to do their job, and I'll tell you why. First, it creates an e-verify system, which means you won't be able to find a job in America if you are not legally here. And that's good, because that's going to take away the incentive for people to come here illegally. And it's going to make it difficult for people that are here illegally to stay because they can't find a job. The second thing the bill is going to do is it's going to provide over $5.5 billion of new funding for border security. That's at least $1.5 billion for a fence, but that's also $3 billion for technology on the border. You know, all sorts of technological advances we've learned that weren't even available to us 5 years ago that will help us secure the border. That will make it easier for them to do their jobs as well. And last but not least, it's going to allow us to bring out the people that are here illegally and register them, get their fingerprints, get a background check, a national security check on them, make them pay a fine. We're not going to know who they are. If you're a criminal, you're not going to get to stay. And if you're not, you're going to have to bide your time waiting in line behind the people that did it the right way. You're not going to qualify for any federal benefits or food stamps, but we're going to know who you are. And this is going to allow ICE agents to focus on the bad guys, on the really bad people that are ones we should be focused on, and be able to deport them. So I think this is going to help them in the long term. But we have taken their input. We continue to seek their input. And I have nothing but the highest respect for the men and women who are on the front lines in trying to enforce our laws, even though sometimes the politicians get in the way. The second email is from Alan. He writes, "Why can't this bill be a simple bill requiring all the fixes such as border security, guest workers, and deportation to be developed? What's going on now is total madness." Well, if what you mean by what's going on now with regards to our laws is total madness, absolutely. What we have now is de facto amnesty. The law is not being enforced. Millions of people here illegally. They can't really be removed because the agents have their hands tied behind their back. So I agree. That's why I've gotten involved in it. All the elements you call for are actually in the bill. For example, border security. As I outlined earlier, we add $5.5 billion in border security. If after 5 years they're not apprehending 90% of the people that are trying to cross illegally, we have an additional $2 billion of border security. But the real kicker with regards to the border is E-Verify, an electronic system that's going to check whether someone that's being hired is legally here. And if an employer hires you illegally, we have doubled and sometimes even tripled the fines for those violations. We think that's going to be the most important border measure of all. So the bill does have those elements you outlined, and that's why it's so important that you continue to write and that we continue to communicate. Next, let's go to obviously what happened in Boston. It's a terrible situation, and our hearts break for the people that are there. We got an email from Dylan in Stuart, Florida, who writes, "These past few days have been a very alarming and crazy week for everyone in America. Whether it's been the bombing at the Boston Marathon or the explosion in Texas, everyone has been on edge. My question to you is actually about the defense of America. It is great that the Boston bombers were stopped, and I'm actually very happy that the younger brother was taken alive. In your opinion, how can we improve our national defense against terrorist attacks?" Well, Dylan, let me begin by saying that just like America changed after 9/11, I think America will change after Boston. We still have a real terrorist threat, these terror cells, Al-Qaeda and other organizations around the world that continue to plan to attack us both here and abroad, and we need to continue to focus on them. But we have something new emerging, and that is people that actually live within the United States, some of them perhaps even born here, U.S. citizens legally here, who become radicalized once they're here. Whether it's some online Islamic preacher or what have you that really takes them in a very violent direction, these folks become radicalized here in the United States. And then online they learn how to build bombs, and then they go out and carry out these horrible attacks. And just like 9/11 taught us about these terror cells abroad that plan against us, Boston is showing us that there are terror cells in the United States that may or may not be communicating with people abroad, but know enough about what's happening to be able to organize themselves and carry out these attacks like what happened in Boston. We need to realize that and begin to focus on that. And I don't have all the answers right now. I can tell you, though, it's important for us to be vigilant as to exactly what's happening, because in many ways this is the new face of terrorism. Homegrown extremist elements living within our borders right now who are here, some of whom have grown up in this country, who for whatever reason become radicalized and decide to act out on it, and presents the kind of dangers and tragedies that we saw last week in Boston. My last question that I want to deal with tonight is about the internet sales tax, and this is from Glenn in St. John's. He writes, "The Marketplace Fairness Act, which is currently making it through the Senate, is only being supported by some state and local governments and a few businesses, not the people. I've read that this bill will close another tax loophole, but does government not consider any monies not going directly to Washington a tax loophole?" Well, first, Glenn, let me tell you, I oppose this bill. I voted against it every chance I've gotten. To be fair, the money doesn't go to Washington, it goes to the states. Here's what the bill says. If you buy something on the internet, the company that sold it to you has to collect sales tax for the state that you live in and send it to them. So let me give you a perfect example. Let's suppose you're a business in Florida and you sell to someone in Alaska. You're going to have to collect sales tax, or any state that has a sales tax, I should say, California. You're going to have to collect California's sales tax. And you're going to have to send that sales tax to California at the end of the year. Now think about it. You're a business based in Florida. You have no offices in California. You don't vote in California. Maybe you've never even visited California. But now you're going to have to collect California's sales tax and send it to them. Well, this doesn't just apply to the 50 states. This applies to over 9,000 jurisdictions that levy sales tax. Cities, counties, school boards, special districts, and the states. Can you just imagine, as a business located in Florida, having to collect taxes for all of these different entities across the country that charge sales tax? And here's how it gets worse. They can audit you. They can come after you. They can say you didn't send us enough sales tax. You can get hauled into tax court in a state that you've never even visited or lived in, where you don't vote and you have no representation. And here's why that's problematic. Because you become an easy target. For a politician, a governor, or whatever in one of these states, a mayor, what have you, going after people that live in another state that can't vote against them, that's the easiest thing to do. This is nothing but a money grab. This is nothing but states wanting billions of dollars in new revenue because they don't want to cut spending. They don't have the political courage to raise taxes, which in my opinion is a bad idea. So what's the easiest thing to do? Let's collect taxes from people that don't live here and can't vote here. That's what this is. It is a disaster. If this passes, the people who vote for it will regret the day they did it. But unfortunately, I believe that's where the Senate's headed, despite our best efforts, and I hope we can defeat it. Well, I want to thank all of you for your emails and your letters. I want you to know your input matters. For example, on immigration, our bill is just a starting point. It's not a take it or leave it offer. We look forward to getting input and ideas on how we can make it better. So we encourage you to write us your letters and send us your emails, and who knows, maybe your letter or email will be the one we read on the air next week. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to you. As always, I just want to share with you what a privilege and a blessing it is to serve you here in the United States Senate. May God bless all of you. May God bless our wonderful state of Florida. And may God always bless the United States of America.